Hi, this is Kerry Artak with Wicked Stocks, bringing you your weekly Mag 7 update, weekly series we put out now for the last few months, in which we cover the Mag 7. We'll start with Alphabet, symbol GOOGL. Alphabet has broken away in the recent weeks from its high in September, but it has not closed yet on a weekly basis below the low of the high, that is 244.66. And until it does, we're still anticipating in the weeks ahead, probably by the end of November or sooner, this objective that is a longer-term objective in the 264.24 to 273.57 region that became a 2 to 3 month objective following the settlement above this channel top at 223.61 back in early September. So the 260s, 270s remain the overall objective, and that could be sooner than later, holding above 244.66. If we close below 244.66 this week, Friday, then we're likely to ease back to 223.61. This could be 3 to 5 weeks, couple of months, something like that, where we could bottom out not only through the rest of the year, but into the first quarter of next year, and round up from here into the 260s, 270s. If we were to close, and I'll just take us back to this chart here, if we were to close below 223.61 over the next month or two, and I'm getting way ahead of the game here, then we have 199.26. So, it is very stair-step. I don't expect 199.26 unless we close below 223.61. If you are long Google or Alphabet above 223.61, this 260s, 270s area is the zone in which you can scale out of some of your long position, take profits, some profits there. Let's move on to Amazon. Amazon has, over the last few months, topped out in this high weekly settlement price, 237.68, and high itself on the weekly chart at 242.52, this 5-point range roughly, able to contain buying on a monthly, possibly quarterly basis. If we can, in the coming weeks, close above 242.52, we have a 2 to 3 month rally to 266.26, which is a long-term 3-year rising channel top that can contain buying on a quarterly, possibly annual basis. Until then, we have eased back, and in fact, right now, we are in the midst of testing meaningful midterm support between 214.90 and 216.06. We actually tested this rising channel bottom on Monday already. I'm recording this a couple of hours into the opening bell. And 214.9, but I've been showing these structures now for the last 4 or 5 weeks since this high was put out. This is a decent zone of support that you can buy into, especially for 1 to 2 month swing traders. From here, 214.90 to 216.06, we can quite easily round back up into the 237.68 to 242.52 region. But if we do close this week below 214.90, that would be, these arrows are not properly placed, but that is the area. If we were to close below 214.90, we've got a good high for the rest of the year. We should see 191.36, a 5/8 Fibonacci over the last 6 months or so. Within 2 to 3 months, we could potentially, as we continue into Q1, Q2 of 26, continue south all the way into the upper 150s. But I wouldn't consider 158.30 long-term support to be a clear-cut objective unless we were to also then close below 191.36. Let's move on to Meta. Meta is actually in the process of testing its own, what I would call midterm support. In fact, last week, Friday, it closed below this descending channel bottom that this week is at 716.28. But we also have this 6-month rising channel bottom that I really need to see the market close below this week for then anticipating meaningful losses for Meta as we move through the rest of the year. Until then, despite the violation of this 716.28 formation, it's very close. We can bottom out here. As I've been saying now for the last month or so, from here, within 2 to 3 months, we can round up to this 844.15 long-term resistance. So I'm going to take us back to actually, I'm going to move forward on this chart. If we were to close below 700.90 this week, that is a significant sell signal through the rest of the year. This is probably a 3 to 5 month sell-off to 530.88. And yes, I would anticipate this if we close this week below 700.90. Until then, this is the zone to either get long or stay long in, provided we don't close below 700.90 on Friday, allowing this market over the next 2 to 3 months to round up to this significant 844.15 channel top, where we could top out actually on a quarterly, possibly annual basis. So in a nutshell, Meta is constructive, believe it or not, through the rest of the year above 700.90. That will keep 844.15 in reach over the next 3 to 5 months. And if we close this week below 700.90, I expect continued losses over the next 3 to 5 months to 530.88. On to Microsoft. Microsoft is still above the low of the high from about 2-3 months ago and the high of the low from about a month and a half ago. That they come together nicely at 509.43 to 511.97. And since we closed back above them about a month ago, they've been holding pretty well to the downside, still anticipating 538.51 over the next, 3 to 5 weeks. This channel, despite the fact that we violated it a few months ago, can continue to contain monthly buying pressures. We never did close above it. If we do close above 538.51 over the next month or so, 564.41 is a retest. And this significant 5-year channel top did contain buying pressures back in July. I would expect it within 3 to 5 weeks of closing above 538.51. 564.41 can contain buying quite possibly through all of next year. The downside, if we close back below 509.43, this market can, fall back to 468.35 within several months. Now, this happened once before without any downside follow through. So there's a reason to perhaps, be skeptical of whether or not we would fall back into the 460s or not. But I wouldn't see any other way to play this if we were to close below 509.43 than to protect myself down to 468.35 if I were long. Let's move on to Apple. Keep in mind, we provide weekly Apple stock analysis at wickedstocks.com as part of our subscription, but we're providing broad brushstroke here for free on YouTube. 240.34, this former channel bottom we settled above about a month and a half ago, anticipating a retest of the 278.19 5-year channel top over the following 2 to 3 months. We're getting some hesitation here at the December high of 260.10 that may continue through this week and into later October. We could fall back into the low 240s over the next 3 to 5 weeks. But if we do close this week above 260.10, we may just be 3 to 5 weeks away from reaching 278.19. Significant longer-term resistance, able to contain buying through the rest of the year and possibly well into next. Downside, if we close below 240.34, we have a good October high and quite possibly and probably through the rest of the year. I'm going to continue on with this chart and just show that there is this old consolidation base at 225.95. I would consider that a quick 3 to 5 week target, but I do think after all of this, the nice rally we've seen, the double top so far around 260.10, if we close below 240.34, I think the risk is continuing to the downside, possibly as far south as the mid 190s. So I'll leave it at that. Let's move on to Nvidia, another stock that we provide for free on YouTube. Broad brushstroke analysis. This rising channel bottom at 179.18 represents bullish momentum that remains intact as we move into November trade, expecting continued higher highs, 219.64 expected over the next 2 to 3 months above 179.18. And we're also above this old channel at 183.72 this week. We've been trading both sides of that a lot, so I don't put much trend defining quality on this, but I do see 179.18 as your pullback support through the rest of October, and above which 219.64 remains a 2 to 3 month target. If we close below 179.18 at the end of this week, I am then only anticipating within 2 to 3 weeks 168.38. This is a more significant channel structure that may well contain selling through the rest of the year, and we can round up to new highs from there. But if we close below 168.38, then you can expect, possibly within 3 to 5 weeks, this 148.59 one-year channel top, where we could bottom out into the first quarter of next year, possibly through next year, and round up again. But I see no reason to sell Nvidia as we move through the rest of October unless we close below 179.18. Until then, it is stay long. Let's move on to Tesla. Tesla tested this a 7-month channel top last week, 466.95, and below which susceptible to falling back to 362.39 long-term support. It was the settlement a month ago above 362.39 that has set up and still maintains 524.64 as a 5 to 8 month objective. 5 to 8 months because along the way we see this channel top as being able to contain midterm highs. Holding below 466.95 will keep 362.39 in reach by the end of November or sooner. But if we close above 466.95 at the end of this week, by the end of November, we should see 524.64, a 5-year rising channel top that may well contain buying through the first quarter of next year. Let's cover the downside a little bit better than that. We do have the low of the high at 416.57. If we now close this week below 416.57, we've got a 2 to 3, 3 to 5 week sell-off into this 354.22 to 362.39 region, 7-month channel bottom, and that longer-term channel on the previous chart that can contain selling through the rest of the year, possibly well into next, and above which 524.64 remains a 3 to 5 month objective. And finally, the S&P 500 as represented here by the SPY, the S&P 500 Spider ETF. We put out daily SPY analysis at wickedstocks.com subscription. And I just want to mention that it is and has been, as well as the S&P 500 index, testing a 5.5-year channel top for the last few weeks. And if it doesn't close above this structure, it remains highly susceptible to falling back to the February high right here over the next few months. If we can close above this structure at the end of this week, then all systems go to the upside as we move into the first quarter of next year. You can see exactly what these levels are on a day-to-day and weekly basis by going to wickedstocks.com and taking advantage of our 5-day free trial. I will be back next week with another update on the Mag 7. You have a great week.